7 p.m. Eastern time. You know what time it is. It is time for the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show exclusively on here, the Better Sports Network. I am Eric Balkman, your slightly above average host. You may know me from the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown, and of course the FFPC, myffpc.com, the FFPC, the Fantasy Football Players Championship. Want to welcome in my guest co-host. You know this guy, and if you don't know this guy, you should know this guy, especially if you're playing any Devy leagues, any Dynasty leagues, especially with the FFPC. You know his work at Draft Countdown, of course, at Dynasty League Football and Draft Sharks, which you can hear his voice and read his writing there. You follow him on the X at Shane P. Hallam. It is Shane Hallam. Shane, welcome back to the show. A happy February 22nd, 2024 to you. And I would say, hey, you're probably getting ready to go on all this 2024 rookie stuff. But you've already had 2025 rookie stuff out for a while now. You are one of the great people in this industry that is knee deep in rookies, like pretty much year round.
Well, like it's what I do. I remember I've been watching this 2024 class since they were in high school, and that gives you a well-rounded experience. I think I have a 2026 mock draft actually up on Draft Countdown as well. So if you want to really look at the future, you can hop over there and look at that.
It's fantastic. You've been a longtime FFPC Dynasty player, and for the first time, at least that I can think of, maybe we did it once last year, so maybe not the first time, but for sure the first time in 2024. This is an all-rookie show. So Shane and I, coming up on tonight's show, we're going to talk about the rookie quarterbacks, which is especially important for those of you playing in FFPC Dynasty Superflex leagues. Coming up at the bottom of the hour, we're going to attack the running backs. Not a great class this year, but a deep class. We'll talk about that as well. And then a great and a deep class, the wide receivers. That's going to lead off the second hour tonight. Plenty of stuff to get to with those. And, of course, I would be remiss if I didn't mention tight ends, FFPC, a tight end premium format. We're going to get into some tight ends this year as well. So Shane is going to tackle not only some of the studs at each of these positions, but we're going to get into some sleepers that you might need to know when your rookie third round, the third round of your rookie drafts, the fourth round of your rookie drafts come up. And people always say, oh, that doesn't matter. Well, let me give you 2 words why it does matter. Puka Nacua. That's just 2 of them. There's plenty other names out there, but Puka Nacua obviously flipped a lot of people who were trying to punt in Dynasty leagues last year to being contenders at the end of last season and contenders already this season. Now, I won't touch a whole lot on redraft tonight, but I will mention this. If you want to go to myffpc.com, we have the Never Too Early Best Ball tournaments going on right now. These 2 tournaments are going to go all the way up to the start of the NFL draft. They're going to conclude on April 25th. Best ball slim rules. No kickers, no defenses. 20-round draft, 14-week regular season. A champion is crowned after the playoffs after week 17. You can draft with a 30-second, 60-second, 2-hour, and 6-hour clock. So really a clock made for everyone there. Take your shot at a $25,000 grand prize in the Never Too Early Best Ball tournament at just a $125 entry fee, or you can win $10,000 at just a $35 entry fee with the Never Too Early Superflex Best Ball Tournament. Shout out to our producer tonight, Matt Deutsch. We are off and running here, and I want to tackle the quarterbacks. I think this is important not only for, we can get into some Never Too Early stuff, Shane, and if you have a redraft spin on these guys, feel free. But I do want to get into Dynasty mostly with these players tonight and what they mean for Dynasty. And the first guy up, and I'm going off your rankings posted at Draft Countdown. We're going to go in order of how you have these guys situated right now, obviously subject to change. But I want to get into to Caleb Williams, the who's expected to be the number 1 overall pick. Like any number 1 overall picks, I think we're coming up to the season where people are picking at nits with him. This is a guy who won the Heisman Trophy. He put up crazy town banana pants numbers the last couple of years at USC. However, and I was talking with Dave the Dizzle Gerzak about this, he saw his daughter actually attends Notre Dame, and he watched the Notre Dame USC game, and he said, if you didn't tell me Caleb Williams was going to be like a first-round pick or number 1 overall pick, I would have said that this guy's nothing. Like he's like a day 2 or day 3 guy at best. The numbers that he put up were against not so great competition, Shane, but he did make a lot of great plays. He did not exactly have world beaters that he was throwing to, and I think there's something here. You have him ranked as your number 1 quarterback. How confident are you in that? And are there warts that we need to examine here before we go head first into drafting him as the 101 in our rookie dynasty drafts for Superflex?
I'm extremely confident. I mean, point me to a college prospect who didn't have a bad game. Go back and watch Peyton Manning
Mm-hmm.
struggle against Auburn. I think we see that with every player. I'm confident. I think if people start overthinking the 101 and Superflex and not take Caleb Williams, they're going to be disappointed because I think there's a really high floor with Williams that you're getting along with the super high ceiling. Um, he's going to end up in my probably top 5 quarterbacks I've ever scouted since 2004 when I started this, which I have on Draft Countdown, my top 25 grades ever. You can see all my hits and misses, but just the way that Caleb Williams can kind of throw off platform and hit almost any area of the field from almost any angle is pretty exceptional. It's not something that you see too often that a player has that ability. And especially for Caleb Williams, and I know a lot of the analytics guys take stock in this. I mean, he was doing this at 18 years old as a freshman. Spencer Rattler got benched, and Caleb Williams stepped in. He was doing this right off the bat. And so you had a player who was younger, who was able to dominate that early. I think the Notre Dame game was, and this season in general, was pressing a lot for him. USC had one of the worst defenses in college football, and he knew he had to score 40 points to win. We saw him 2 years ago dominate a Utah team, put up 42 points against Utah, who held, I think their defense was top 10 in the country. And he did that twice, had 2 good games against them. So, this season, I think if people want to start grabbing at Caleb Williams and say he doesn't have it, I think he's an underrated running quarterback. He's not going to be Lamar Jackson, but I think he's a player that can put up 300-400 yards a season, which in fantasy is really important. So I even think in the Never Too Early drafts, I've done 1. I got 2 more on the way, I believe. And so I think he's a value in redraft even right now because he's going to have to start year 1 and you're going to get some rushing ability to boot.
The Never Too Early, he is number 17 as far as quarterbacks, and that 1007 is his ADP. And again, that is a single start quarterback league for Caleb Williams. So it sounds like you have confidence that maybe this guy isn't a world beater, but he is going to be a guy that's going to allow you to get some significant fantasy production, both in Superflex and non-Superflex leagues. Now, there has been some kerfuffle lately here, Shane, of who the actual number 2 number 2 quarterback in the draft is. I think for the majority of the season, a lot of people thought it was Drake Maye, to the point where a lot of people were saying, hey, is it Caleb Williams or is it Drake Maye? And now it kind of seems like it's Drake Maye or is it Jayden Daniels as the number 2 quarterback. You currently, on Draft Countdown, have Drake Maye ahead of Jayden Daniels. Can you let us into your insight in this? Because I know it's changing for some people, has not changed for you. Why is Maye ahead of Daniels for you?
It's close. They are back to back on my big board, so it's very close between them. I just think Drake Maye gives you a little more upside with the passing ability that he has. I think Jayden Daniels has the rushing in spades for fantasy. I might flip those two. I might take the running quarterback in Jayden Daniels and hope I could get a 1,000-yard rusher, for a season, get a Justin Fields, get a Lamar Jackson. I think when you're talking about Dynasty, Superflex, even some best ball redraft, Jayden Daniels is really intriguing because that rushing upside. I think people forget that Drake Maye can run too. Like, he's not going to be Jayden Daniels, but he put up almost 500 yards rushing this season. Maye has the legs, and he's going to come in probably over 6'4", 220 pounds. Like, he's kind of Ben Roethlisberger with some wheels. Mm-hmm. Maybe just needs a little more polish. So I think Drake Maye has that upside to be a rock solid top 10 fantasy quarterback if he has the passing ability. I also think Maye has a lot bigger downside for us in fantasy where he could bust. He could be Zach Wilson. There's a lot of plays that Drake Maye just misses, easy throws, easy reads. It's like maddening sometimes. I think you need some experience and need some receivers Jayden Daniels didn't have that this year. Obviously won the Heisman, was exceptional, but also is going to have 2 first-round wide receivers that we'll talk about later, which helps. And, and plus the running ability that Daniels brings to the table. So I think I'd probably prefer Jayden Daniels in fantasy-wise. I feel more comfortable with Drake Maye as a passer. I think both have a lot of upside. Both could be out of the league in 5 years. I think that's the downside of both too.
Well, that's true of anybody. I mean, like that is the NFL.
Fair, I guess.
Not for long. A shout out to Cullen Hoffman, who is watching us on YouTube tonight. Cullen is a guy who won $260,000 in the FFPC this year in the best ball tournament and the FFPC playoff challenge. So congrats to him. I'm actually going to get a chance to interview him tomorrow night, which is going to be a lot of fun. He says he loves Jayden Daniels, and let's transition into Daniels here. So when we talk about Drake Maye versus Jayden Daniels, the first thing I think of is supporting cast. I understand that Daniels was in the SEC, Maye was in the ACC, but I think of Devontae Walker, who, correct me if I'm wrong, Shane, I don't even know if he played a full season in 2023 with North Carolina. And then you have Malik Nabers, who has been getting a huge bump lately in the fantasy industry for how good he could be, not only in Dynasty, but redraft as well. And then Brian Thomas Jr., a guy who is probably going to be going in the first round of the NFL draft as well. Maye did not have those weapons. Jayden Daniels did. It's difficult for me to say, okay, well, this is not it's difficult for me to say, oh, this is Joe Burrow 2.0 from LSU. He's got the weapons. He put up the numbers, saddle up and ride. I don't think it's as simple as that. I think it's more nuanced. Daniels, you said, is close to being your number 2. How much do you factor in his weapons that he had at LSU that Drake Maye did not have at UNC?
I think it's a big difference. If you want to take a look at the offensive lines as well, Jayden Daniels has probably a top 10 pick in the 2025 draft, a top 100 pick at guard in this draft, and Charles Turner. So he had a good offensive line. Drake Maye was really getting blitzed and getting pressured a lot more often than Jayden Daniels was, and Daniels had a little more of an out. I think it does play a part. I had Daniels number 2 for a little bit. Going back and watching them, there are times where Brian Thomas and Malik Nabers bail some bad passes from Jayden Daniels out, and he still gets the touchdown, right? He still gets the stat. And I think Drake Maye was kind of the other side, where sometimes, his receivers and weapons, they weren't bailing him out. Devontae Walker was not allowed to play from the NCAA for the first 4 games, I believe it was, and then got reinstated. And, he's not Malik Nabers or Brian Thomas either. So, that's the case. So I think that plays a part in this for me, that Maye was able to have success 2 years running with a North Carolina offense. He followed up Sam Howell, who's probably the best North Carolina quarterback ever. I think that says something too.
I think those are the top 3. And then after that, it gets a little muddied at the quarterback position. Let's get into J.J. McCarthy here from Michigan, a guy who won the national title this past season, a guy who I have read and listened to a lot of people saying, yeah, McCarthy's good, but man, he should have come back for another year. I don't know where you stand on that. Could he have been the number 1 overall pick in 2025? Quite frankly, you have a draft out for 2025. Would he have figured into that 101 spot? Your thoughts on J.J. McCarthy as it relates to Dynasty, Superflex leagues, Shane, because he's clearly below these top 3, but the upside here and what he can do, I think it's kind of an unknown, given that he's one of the younger guys. He played in a system in Michigan that I don't think necessarily represents the pro-style system that the NFL that Caleb Williams, Drake Maye, and Jaden Williams played under. But just give me the skinny on J.J. McCarthy. Why is he your number 4 quarterback?
I think the tool set is there for McCarthy. The decision-making is not. So I think going back to school would have been a great choice for him. The 2025 quarterback class is absolute garbage right now. That could change. I don't have a first-round pick at quarterback in that class right now. I think J.J. McCarthy would have been in contention for the number 1 overall pick had he gone back and improved on that decision-making a little bit. Michigan ran the ball a ton. They didn't really face any adversity, other than maybe the Alabama playoff game. None was really that close. The Ohio State game briefly. So he didn't play many fourth quarters. It's an experience thing. He had a game with 8 passes, a game with 13 passes. Like, it's tough to know, does JJ McCarthy have enough passing experience to be successful in the NFL? I think when you watch the film, you see an NFL quarterback. He's an NFL arm, very compact throwing motion, very good footwork, knows how to plant. But he just doesn't really, I don't think he understands exactly how to read a defense and go from progression 1 to progression 2. In Superflex rookie drafts, I think McCarthy is going to go higher than he's being projected right now. I have a 7-round mock draft coming out Monday. He's going to be going number 8 to the Atlanta Falcons in that mock draft. And if that happens, people are going to be taking JJ McCarthy at the 106, 107 in those Superflex rookie drafts.
So, if I'm hearing you right, it's not like a talent thing. It's not like, okay, can he do this? It's a question of, he didn't have to do this at Michigan, and now he's going to, especially if he goes to Atlanta, he's going to have to do this in the pros. Like, you don't question the physical abilities and the talent. It's just a matter of this guy might need more marinating when he gets to the pros before we totally get to see what he's capable of, right?
Yeah, I think outside of Caleb Williams, I don't know if there's a quarterback that I feel comfortable just sliding into an offense that's pre-made and he's good to go, right? I think Jayden Daniels, the offense built around him, Maye needs worked up. I think McCarthy's the same way. You need to kind of work him up. You can't put him in this very complex offense because we haven't seen him do it. He hasn't had to do it, like you said, when it was a lot easier. You won games by handing the ball off to Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards. Why make McCarthy throw 30, 40 times a game? He had attempts in games 13, 16, 17, 8, 21, 20, 23, 20, 18. Like, that's not typical top 10 passing numbers. We want guys that pass the ball a lot. So, I think he first read, he knows pre-snap what to do. I think in the play, he just needs developed. I think the upside's there for McCarthy. So I think people need to consider him. I didn't like him at all kind of coming out of the season. I went back to the film more recently, and he's definitely growing on me.
We're going to talk about Michael Penix Jr. in a little bit, but now that we've gotten the first 4 quarterbacks under our belt that you have as far as your rankings go, are you saying that as far as let's focus this on Superflex redraft only, are you saying that Caleb Williams is the only difference maker and then it's everybody else, or would you put Maye or Daniels on like a tier or two below Caleb Williams for, again, not dynasty, Superflex redraft?
I think Caleb Williams is a tier of his own. I think I have Daniels in that tier 2 because of the rushing ability, especially when you talk about a never too early best ball. Like, give me Daniels. He has 3 games with 120 yards rushing. I think it's worth drafting him and having him on the team. And then I think below that is Maye and McCarthy, who, because Maye's going to be a top pick, probably will start, but I don't feel comfortable that either of those guys are going to put up, monster. We might be talking more Will Levis fantasy points than CJ Stroud fantasy points.
Let's talk about Michael Penix Jr. We just talked about McCarthy. Penix Jr. actually played McCarthy this. Am I remembering this right? Michigan-Washington in the national championship, right?
National championship.
God, it just happened like a month and a half ago, and I've already forgotten about it. Penix Jr., a guy who started at Indiana, went to Washington, had just some baller statistical outputs, but a guy who's no stranger to injury. I mean, he's pretty much had every single joint and soft tissue on his body hurt over the course of 4 years or 5 years, whatever it was in college. And a guy that I think he's a lefty, if I remember correctly. And it always seems like lefties get unfairly penalized for whatever reason when they get to the NFL. But Penix Jr., he's your number 5 quarterback. I saw him light it up. I know he had Odunze, and that obviously helped out. But your thoughts on Penix and what he can offer FFPC players, and I'll let you take it from redraft or dynasty, Shane, however you want to go here.
Yeah, redraft, I'd stay away from the rest of the quarterbacks. I just don't think there's confidence that they're starting year 1, right? And it's just could be a wasted roster spot. But, long-term, Penix throws a beautiful ball. Sometimes those lefties, it just looks weird. But I don't think Penix is that way. I think he's one of him and Tua, kind of the 2 lefties that it looks good. Ton of volume, but has had 2 ACL tears. He can't really move how he used to back in Indiana. There's some good deep stats out there about, when the play kind of breaks down, Michael Penix is one of the least quarterbacks least likely to run for a gain in college football. You know, there's a lot of statues in college football. I think Penix maneuvers the pocket well. Like, he doesn't look unathletic, but in the NFL, it's a whole different beast. You know, we know it. Like, you get pressured, you need to be able to move out of the pocket nowadays. And so that's my fear with him. I think he's going to go round 2 into round 3 of the NFL draft, which definitely is, you're going to get a shot to start. And I think Penix deserves a shot to start. You put him in Minnesota with Kevin O'Connell, right, in the Sean McVay type offense. I think he can be successful like we see Matthew Stafford doing. But I don't necessarily have confidence when he faced that top defense in Michigan. It was rough. And we saw the weaknesses come out. And he did have 3 top 100 picks, potentially at receiver, Rome Odunze, Jalen Polk, and Jalen McMillan. And I think he had 2 other receivers who are draftable in the future, and 2 tight ends that might get drafted in this draft. So when you talk about weapons, you can't get much better than that.
No, you can't. And he was going up against those Pac-12 defenses for the majority of the season as well, which we can't underrate that. Speaking of Pac-12 defenses and speaking of quarterbacks that transferred, Bo Nix, who I believe is, 1 year, 2 years younger than you, Shane? Something around. I think he's
pretty close. I'll take
pretty close, right? Yeah. Nix started off at Auburn. He ended up transferring to Oregon, put up some really good years there. And actually, Penix and Nix actually battled a couple of times this past year. Some really good college football games. Nix is a guy that you have number 6 overall. We've already established that you don't want to count on Bo Nix for redraft purposes. But for dynasty purposes, is this another guy like Penix that is going to go in the 2nd or 3rd round that can marinate, that can develop for a year or 2, and then maybe have the opportunity to start on not only the team that drafted him or maybe somebody else? You know, what happened to the Green Bay Packers when they were doing that in the 90s, where they draft a quarterback in the 3rd or 4th round, let him marinate for 2 years, and then they'd flip him for a 2nd round pick? It seemed like it happened all the time. It doesn't happen anymore. I don't know if that's going to happen with Bo Nix, but clearly you see something here with him because he's number 6 for your quarterbacks this year.
Like, I have some Devy shares of Bo Nix I took coming out of high school, and he was one of the worst quarterbacks I've ever seen at Auburn. And I was like, wow, that's a wasted pick, right? And then 6 years later, here we are. I'm like, hey, it worked out, kind of. You know, it's crazy that turnaround in a system that worked for him. You know, Nix has the athleticism. He has the rushing ability. He's the guy you want to get outside. The problem for Nix is the downfield passing just isn't there. I mean, it was few and far between, and when it was to Troy Franklin, a top 50 pick at receiver, who I think Franklin kind of made a lot more of that happen in locating the ball than Nix did. So we're talking about kind of the old West Coast style quarterback who, you know, and I don't know, where does that work in the NFL? Does it work in a Shanahan type offense? Maybe, but you still need to be able to hit the rope. I just worry, does Nix have enough of the oomph, you know, to throw the ball to the sideline quickly to make it work? I don't know. But yeah, I think he's like Penix, going to probably go in the 2nd or 3rd round. Both those guys disappointed me in the Senior Bowl practices. I thought that might be the time if one really shined out in a different system, different coaching, like, okay, maybe I can buy in. Neither one really stood out to me as, yeah, this guy looks great. So that's kind of soured me on both, more as day 2 picks. I think in fantasy, your hope is Nix goes somewhere where they're going to let him run, and that's going to score your fantasy points.
This brings up an interesting point. Let's talk about Senior Bowl scouting here. From the standpoint, so I look at the Senior Bowl, and I think you can learn stuff from the offensive and defensive linemen, right? Because there's a lot of one-on-one stuff, and I think like we can glean stuff from that. However, from a quarterback wide receiver standpoint, you're throwing together a bunch of guys that have never played together. They have not played in the same offense together. They might not have even been in the same conference together. So for me, I always looked at the Senior Bowl like if you show anything as a quarterback or receiver, either catching passes or throwing passes to guys you have had zero time to build chemistry with, that's something there. So I don't necessarily downgrade quarterbacks and wide receivers that don't show out, because I think it's asking a lot of them to just throw everything together here over the course of a week and expect them to perform. But you saw it differently with Penix and Nix. What did you see from those guys that have you underwhelmed, we'll say, for dynasty purposes?
Yeah, it's a good point. Like, I'm not expecting the world, right? You know, I don't expect Penix or Nix or any quarterback to go in there and look like, you know, a Joe Burrow. But you can go back and watch Baker Mayfield and Josh Allen when they were at the Senior Bowl. You could tell they could process what to do in a lot of those 7-on-7s and 11-on-11s. That's the processing just wasn't there for me. And what that doesn't say that these guys can't be NFL quarterbacks. What it says to me is there's a big transition to a different style of offense when you're asked to do more. And I want to see the wheels turning. I don't need super accurate passes every time. I don't need the timing routes to be good. Like you said, you're with receivers you don't know. That's fine. I want to be able to make some quicker decisions on the fly, and avoid pressure, some of those types of plays. So that's what was missing. I didn't necessarily downgrade them. It's kind of, here's where I had them. I was hoping one would rise to the occasion and say, okay, this guy can go in the first round. We see the potential, and that just didn't happen.
Are there 4 first-round quarterbacks for you this year in the NFL draft?
Yes.
Those top 4. Okay, perfect. All right, here's the way I want to do sleepers here with this position. Sleepers is a bad term. I just didn't have a better term to call them, but let's just say everybody else. So I have a few guys I wanted to ask you about, but what I wanted to do first is give you an opportunity for all the guys. We talked about your top 6 quarterbacks here. You have, my God, 50 ranked quarterbacks this year. So it's insane.
Yeah, I added number 50 today, so I watched another one. So
okay, yeah, Parker McKinney from Eastern Kentucky. Watch out, the number 50th ranked quarterback there. Yeah, for Shane Hallam. So let's talk about the quarterbacks you want to talk about here. Are there any other 2nd or 3rd round guys? Are there any day 3 guys that we should be thinking about? And I'll shift this to Superflex Dynasty. Players you want to try to keep on your roster here.
I think there's one other potential day 2 player, and that's Spencer Rattler out of South Carolina. The quarterback, 5-star, went to Oklahoma, transferred to South Carolina, got benched for Caleb Williams at Oklahoma, and then made this transfer out to South Carolina offense that terrible blocking and a lot of problems. But Rattler obviously was a high recruit, has the physical tool set, was probably the most consistent quarterback in the Senior Bowl, showed some of that processing. He was probably the one that kind of stepped up to me and said, okay, maybe he could be a 3rd round pick with the tool set and with the potential. So I think if you're, super flex dynasty and we start getting into the 3rd round of super flex drafts, hey, if there's a quarterback that goes in the 3rd, 4th round that has the arm, that has maybe the some movement ability like Rattler, I think it's worth a shot. And that could be a guy that works out.
Okay, rapid fire on some of these other guys here. I'm going to pose this question to you. I don't know if you know this. I'm a huge Florida State Seminoles fan, have been for like 30 years. Well, no. Yeah, about 30 years. Jordan Travis. Who would have thought that it was the Northern Alabama game that would end the season for the Seminoles when Travis got hurt? Had he not had this bad knee injury, Shane, where would he rank for you? You have him number 9 for your quarterbacks. Where would you have him if he was healthy right now?
I think he'd have a shot to be number 7. I think he'd still be in that 7 to 9 range. I think he's still there with Pratt and Rattler right now.
Is it because of the offense he played in Tallahassee or what is it about him that, because there's people talking about him being a potential Heisman candidate, and I know college and professional football is different, but what is it about Travis that has you keeping him further down besides the injury?
I think size and some of the arm strength down the field. He hits some passes down the field. Like he can hit those passes, but there's a lot of downfield passes that Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson caught. I said, that's a pick in the NFL, right? Like in college, it worked. In the NFL, that's not going to fly. And I think Travis is kind of the prototypical backup. And even before the knee injury, this is kind of where I had him, as like a backup who comes in and just starts winning a couple games. He's running around, right? So I think he's a good football player. I just think the ceiling is very low with Jordan Travis. He's not going to turn into a magical starter because of the arm strength in the zip. Mm-hmm.
From what I remember, an up and down career for Joe Milton at Tennessee. He made some plays, but there was something left to be desired, which probably is the reason you have him 11th among your quarterbacks. What's his future in the NFL?
I think he's going to get drafted. I think when you have a guy that's 6'3", 230 pounds and can probably run a 4.5 you're just gonna get drafted. Joe Milton's out there doing backflips at the Senior Bowl. Like he's super athletic, has a big arm, can throw from his knee 70 yards. But honestly, he's like a faster Jamarcus Russell. Joe Milton's his Senior Bowl performance is probably bottom 5 of quarterbacks I've ever seen. And I've seen guys that went to the CFL immediately playing that game. Like Milton just cannot. There's no touch on the football, and I just can't read a defense. I think the Tennessee offense was the best thing for him, but maybe if you want to swing for the fences, 5th round, 6th round, FFPC, we got the 7th round. Take Joe Milton and just hope he gets a shot.
Not that I was following his career super close, but Sam Hartman, when he was at Wake Forest, I thought was just saddled just being on a bad football team. Then he transfers to Notre Dame, and I had higher hopes for him. And he didn't necessarily wow me. What was your take on Hartman's final year in college football with the Fighting Irish?
I think he did well within that system. It was a big change. Wake's system is very kind of wonky, almost Tennessee Volunteer-esque, where it's kind of built for the quarterback just to make quick decisions off the line. Notre Dame, he had to process more. He could do that. Ran around a little bit. I think he's a tough player. I think he's like Sean Clifford last year, who got drafted a lot higher than anyone ever thought because of the intangibles. It wouldn't surprise me even if the Packers pulled an old Matt Hasselbeck, right? Drafted Sam Hartman in the 6th, 7th round and tried to develop him would make sense.
The last one I want to talk about comes from NFL football royalty. Talia Tagovailoa, starting quarterback for the Maryland Terrapins, a guy who was back-to-back second team all Big Ten, and he enters the draft this year. Put up some really good numbers with Maryland. I don't know how much of that was Maryland trying to catch up in some games this year. Maybe it was influenced by that. Maybe it wasn't. He's number 14 for you on quarterbacks this year. Why do you have guys like Devin Leary, Austin Reed, Michael Pratt all in front of Tagovailoa?
I like Tagovailoa. Successful. I thought he did really well at the Shrine in the All-Star games this year. Definitely tough, but I mean, he's just so inconsistent. There's some games where he couldn't hit the broadside of a barn, and some games where he looked like he could be an all-star and an all-pro. But the bad games really outweighed the good. Did not get a combine invite. Not a great sign if you're a quarterback. So I think you add that in, and we're talking, borderline undrafted.
I'll tell you what, we have gotten way deeper into the quarterbacks than I thought we would tonight. And that is the amuse-bouche tonight. This is nothing compared to what's coming up here. We're going to tackle the running backs, receivers, tight ends. Running backs are coming up next, and we're leading it off with a bomb. A guy that I cannot believe Shane Hallam has ranked as his number 1 running back, but a guy I'm thrilled that he does for sure. He's Shane Hallam from Draft Countdown, Draft Sharks. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. We'll step out for a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about that bomb and tackle the running backs for Dynasty Fantasy Football in the FFPC. Don't go anywhere. This is the Better Sports Network.
The thing with Dynasty is that it's so hard to get a good league going. Like, it's very difficult to get all these friends that are going to be paying attention, or they're going to stick with it, and they're not going to say, "Oh, I don't want to play anymore. My team stinks. Find somebody else next year." And then you're collecting dues, and then you're getting in arguments, and you're arguing with people on Twitter about dues. Like, we've seen too much of that going on. So it's very difficult. And what happens is you find like 5 or 6 good people that want to play, and then you don't have enough people, and you fill the league with a bunch of weirdos. So what I like doing, honestly, at this stage is if I'm going to play Dynasty, I want to play on a nice, clean, serious, professional site, and I go to FFPC to play, right? FFPC has never had a league fold. Eric Bachman over there told me that. He's like, if somebody has to leave a league, we just fill it. So your option is you can go and do a startup, and like Jack said in the chat, you start it, and then you go and you figure out who you're going to take from the top down. And if you want to do like a long rebuild, or a long-term team, or if you want to try and win right away and get a bunch of vets, you can do that. Or you can adopt an orphan team, and with that you go out and somebody quit, and that's so much fun, because then you take their team and you have all these guys that you like, but then you have all of these guys that they had that you don't like, and that's actually way more fun, because then you can trade all those guys, and it's so much fun to trade. Like when I go to orphan teams, I used to say, "Oh, I'm not going to take this team because all the players I don't like them. I only want players I do like. But I've realized that it's actually more fun to take the teams that have a couple guys you really like and a couple guys that everyone else likes that you don't like, and then trade them. Like go and grab an orphan team like Gabe Davis and trade him to some Gabe Davis guy. So go do that now. Use the you can use the QR code here or a link in the description, or go to myffpc.com. Just make sure you use promo code COOP when you get set up. They'll give you $25 when you deposit 35 or more. And that's another thing. When you make a league with your friends, Coop isn't giving you $25, right? You have to pay the full dues. This time you get a little discount. So yeah, go over there. And also for you maniacs out there, they do have high stakes leagues. So these leagues, if you want, you can go big time. I know some of the redraft leagues. We announced on this channel a redraft league that 10K buy-in. I'm not sure the Dynasty ones go that high, but they go into the thousands. So if you want to take this real seriously and get crazy with it, do it. That's the place to do it. myffpc.com, promo code COOP, baby. Go get set up.
24 minutes until the top of the hour. You are watching the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC, the HSFF Hour. The Road of His High Stakes Throwdown being joined tonight by Draft Countdown and Draft Sharks, Shane Hallam. Follow him on the X at Shane P. Hallam. I want to get into running backs in this segment, Shane. Excuse me. Before I do, let's look at this class as a whole, right? I think we as Dynasty players get very excited to take the top running back or the top two running backs with the first couple picks, the first few picks of the draft. I think back to last year, Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, two guys that were not only highly valued in Dynasty, they were highly valued in redraft. I don't necessarily want you to compare this year's class to 2023, but just this year's class. Is it overwhelming? Is it meh? Is it underwhelming? Is it solid? Is it average? How do you see this year's crop of running backs in the NFL draft?
I think the narrative is that it's a bad class. I think the narrative is wrong. I see it as an average class, maybe even slightly above average when you take the holistic view of the group. Yeah, we're not going to get a first round pick at running back this year. We're going to be lucky to get a second round pick in the NFL draft running back this year.
Ooh, spicy.
But the third and fourth round, I think, is going to be chock full of running backs. As we learned with Devon Chain, running back taken in the fourth round now for fantasy, that's fine. That's high enough with the way the NFL treats running backs. So I think you have to just readjust how you view the class. Where, when I'm, like I said, I have a 7-round mock draft coming out on Monday, and I really struggle to not have 20 running backs drafted. Like, I think there's 20 running backs that should be drafted in this class. And to me, that says it's a pretty solid, pretty above average group.
Okay. Above average, I like. I don't like the fact that we won't see a first or second round, or I shouldn't say that. I don't like the fact that we probably will not see a first or second round running back in this class. So as a result, let me hold that question because I think it's a better question once we've talked about the receivers a little bit more. Let's get into the running backs. Mother of God, Shane Hallam, my favorite person in the world. And maybe I just haven't been doing enough research on this, but you are the first person I have seen. And I'm wearing my Bucky Badger UW-Madison sweatshirt tonight in honor of this, not an accident. Your number one running back in this class right now, Braelon Allen from the Badgers, Wisconsin, 6'2", 238. Now, listen, I'm a big Badgers fan, but even I struggled to see how Braelon Allen would win in the NFL. I understand when Luke Fickell came in and the guy from North Carolina who's escaping me now, the offensive coordinator that came in, Phil Longo, came in and they want to do the air raid. And I knew that Braelon Allen would have an opportunity, like a lot of Badgers running backs before him. I think about Jonathan Taylor. I think about James White, who had the opportunity to catch. Yeah, Melvin Gordon's a perfect example. All these guys that had the opportunity their last year at Wisconsin to catch passes and show NFL evaluators that they would be able to do this in the next level. Braelon Allen did that for a good chunk of the season. He might even finish as their leading receiver. I don't know. But he did catch a lot of passes. I don't necessarily think he ever wowed me with what he was able to do, because I knew how talented that offensive line was. You have him number one. I'm going to stop talking and just bask in the glow of this. Tell us why Braelon Allen is the best running back in this class, Shane.
I think people are sleeping on him. Look, I think the upside, we'll talk about some other running backs where there might be more upside, but Braelon Allen is a 230, 240-pound running back who has really, really good deep speed. I think he's going to have a great 40 time for his size and is a powerful runner. Like you said, we finally got to see he can catch the football. So he's multi-talented. Now, I think Braelon Allen in short space in terms of he's not going to make those quick cuts. He's not going to be the guy that cuts into the hole and is a one-cut zone scheme running back. But in the NFL, Braelon Allen can handle a load of 20, 25 carries, right? And have a third down running back come to play. We don't have many teams anymore that it's one guy. It's Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor, just going. Even those guys, even Taylor started ceding carries to Zach Moss, right? When he came back from injury. I think Braelon Allen could be a lead 1A in a 1B situation, and I think has the upside to score double-digit touchdowns in fantasy. So I think other people are sleeping on him. I think when I watched Braelon Allen, he was the youngest running back in this class. At 17 years old, was dominating in the Big Ten. That said something to me. If he can do that, and we know how good Big Ten running backs have been in the NFL, that's where you want to get your running backs from. I think he's going to have a lot more success. Is he going to be the first running back drafted? Absolutely not. But he's who I have at the top right now.
He played high school football about an hour down Highway 41 south from me. Braelon Allen, and this is all anybody ever wanted to talk about when he got to Wisconsin. You would hear the national college announcers when they're calling Wisconsin games and say, "And can you believe he's only 17 years old? He's only 7." That's all they talked about all the time. So now we still kid, even though he's much older than 17. Braelon Allen will always be 17 in our hearts in Wisconsin. Another Big Ten running back, and he played at a university that Braelon Allen was rumored to transfer to after the Badgers decided not to hire Jim Leonard, and they hired Luke Fickell instead. Michigan. And Michigan won the national title this year. We just talked about J.J. McCarthy in the last segment. And by the way, Mile High Luke, I definitely see your question in YouTube. I want to get to that in the second or our next segment when we're tackling receivers, because it's a great Malik Nabers question. But let's talk about Blake Corum here for a second. This is another guy, too, that I don't necessarily see it, but again, this is a player that's probably not going to be drafted in the first 2 rounds of the NFL draft, so I don't necessarily have to see it. He just might need to fall into the right spot. What do you like about Blake Corum to put him as your number 2 running back, Shane?
He's almost the flip side of Braelon Allen, where I love Blake Corum in those short spaces. He has the vision, he has the shifty footwork to make that cut and take the ball and run to a completely different area of the field. We saw it in the national championship. We saw it against Alabama, where he got a touchdown pulled out of his behind pretty much. That shouldn't have happened, but because he had the skill set to do it. Now, Blake Corum's not a guy that I think head down, run up the middle. I don't think he's that type of player, but has pretty soft hands. Seemed to come back from his ACL injury this season successfully. Who he reminds me a lot of coming out as a prospect was Maurice Jones-Drew. The player, very short, but very built and stacked. So, I think
he was a squat guy. I remember that, low center of gravity.
And go look up pictures of Blake Corum without a shirt on. You're like, ooh, this is a guy that is not going down easy, right? He's going to bull you over. So, once again, Blake Corum's not going to be a lead NFL running back, but I think could be, in a Green Bay Packers type system, be an Aaron Jones type of runner.
I have seen him being mocked there. Did you have him mocked to Green Bay?
I keep doing it. I can't escape it.
Yeah, no, I get that, and it makes perfect sense because the Packers are getting a little long in the tooth in the running back room, for sure. We want to shift our focus to Jonathon Brooks here. The question that I will lead things off here, he tore his ACL this past year, is recovering from that. Shane, had he not torn his ACL, would he have been your number 1 running back in the class?
I think so. Yeah, I think it's kind of the difference. I have a little bit of hesitation. I mean, Brooks, if you took his body of work this season, was the best of any running back. He would be my RB1 if I'm just looking at this year as all I could ever see. But this is all he ever did, and he got hurt and had a shortened season. It's like we have a small sample size that just gives me some fear because there's definitely some tape that's out there, plays where Jonathon Brooks just fails to see the hole in front of him, fails to have that explosiveness off the line. And then there's some games where, he is exceptional and catching the ball, getting outside, making these big plays. I think Jonathon Brooks has the biggest upside of running backs. I honestly, and look, this is me. I play the never too early best balls, and I draft way too many rookies, so I'll never win. But but like these running backs in general, I think are undervalued in redraft because people are like, it's a bad class. Glenn Brooks, ACL, I mean, he's fallen a little bit. I think I take the chance. We've seen guys come back from the ACL. I think Brooks has the upside as a rookie to be really, really good.
You bring that up. This is sort of a draft philosophy question here because you're talking about playing these never too early tournaments at the FFPC, which they're not just rookies. This is everybody. And Scott Connor, who I know you're familiar with from Dynasty and Chill and Dynasty League Football. This is a guy, and I've drafted against him in the KFFSC early on too. He will pound rookies and rookies and rookies and more rookies. And I feel like it's not a double-edged sword, but it's a double whammy this year because one, everybody assumes the running back class is down. So if you don't believe that, you're getting an edge on your competition. And two, I think when you're drafting in January and February every single year, all these guys get unfairly pushed down because people, they're afraid of where's he going to land? Like who's he going to be behind? Is he going to be the starter? Is he going to be the backup? Is he going to be the number 3? Is he a day 2 pick? Is he a day 3 pick? I drafted in a KFFSC league on Super Bowl Sunday last year. I got Bijan Robinson in the 2nd and Jahmyr Gibbs in the 4th because everybody was super scared about drafting these running backs early. We're talking about it. We're pointing out some of the warts in some of these guys tonight. And there is an opportunity if you want to draft now, and you kind of make fun of yourself by drafting all these rookies. There is a non-zero chance that you hit on not one or two, but maybe several of these guys because everybody else is pushing them so far down right now, Shane.
And I think you can take a 0, right? A guy that ends up going in the 6th round that I thought would go in the 3rd or 4th.
Right.
But because I got a value of a player 5-6 rounds later than he ends up going in August, I'm making up that difference. So I probably go a little too heavy with it, but ultimately I think it's better to draft now and draft these rookies before they have landing spots. Like the talent usually shines out.
The talent shined out not only at Oregon, but for Florida State with Trey Benson, a guy who transferred to the Seminoles this year, had a really, really great season. A player that I have talked with, and this is probably my fault, but I'm talking about his fantasy football prospects, and I'm only talking about him with fellow Florida State fans. And everybody's, oh my God, he's the 2nd running back off the board. He's the 1st running back off the board. I don't know if I go that far. You have him as your number 4 running back. What does Trey Benson do well? How does he win at the next level with his skill set?
I mean, he's athletic. I think he's one of the top 4 that kind of puts both together. He has the home run ability, but also has the short area quickness. You can see that on film. His successful runs are really good. That's the upside because I think he catches the ball well. I think the vision's there. Like he really should have dominated this year with how good Florida State was. And that's what holds me back was that he didn't. There's just a lot of games. I think it's maybe contact balance where he just goes down way too easy for me to have him as the RB1 of the class. Now, I think once we get past the combine here, and Trey Benson's one of the most athletic running backs in the class and does have some good tape, I think he probably will go maybe as the RB2, RB3 of the group. But I have more questions with him than I think the top 3 that we talked about already. I definitely see success in the NFL, maybe not as the guy. I think Benson could be the one that we come out of this and say, wow, he is a top 10 NFL running back. Or he could be the one that we come out of this and say, wow, this guy was way overdrafted and can't play.
Is he that polarized? I mean, do you see his outcome as being one of those? Like, could he land in the middle as like a potential 1B in a rushing attack in the NFL?
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely could happen. I think the range of outcomes for him is from the high all the way to the low.
Okay.
But like I said, I think my fear is like it goes down too easily. But now if you get him in a system where you can give some space and let him use that athleticism, I think this could really work.
Last week's co-host on this show, our mutual friend Todd Burrows from Run to Daylight, Sharp Football Analysis, and I brought up Jaylen Wright with him, and I have been seeing a lot of I don't want to say like both ends of it. I think it's mostly love I'm seeing from Jaylen Wright on social media right now, as far as how people view him as a potential NFL draft pick. I guess the combine is probably going to, well, the combine's going to figure in a lot of these guys, but maybe more importantly for Jaylen Wright, what kind of a running back is he going to be at the next level? And I guess the biggest thing for me is, and maybe I'm picking at nits here, why was Trey Benson one spot ahead of Jaylen Wright for you on your rankings?
No, it's fair. I love Jaylen Wright. You can tell Todd asked Todd who DM'd him to start watching Jaylen Wright. It was me. I told him, I was like you got to watch this guy. Yeah. But no, I mean, like Todd's a great running back evaluator. So, when he's in, I'm like, okay, I feel good about this. I had Jaylen Wright my top 5 running backs back in early January, and he's kind of stayed there. He doesn't quite have the production that Benson has in the receiving game. I think it's the one big question. Tennessee doesn't really use their running backs in the receiving game. Kind of, I mean, it's a very different system. Kind of the old Wisconsin, like we're not throwing to the running back. Right. If we're gonna throw, we're gonna throw down the field. So that's my one question with him. But has been on Bruce Feldman's freak list. I think at his size, Jaylen Wright is gonna come in and run maybe a 4.42 at 200 plus pounds. I think people are gonna be set off. And when you watch him, I just watch a guy that no one gets like a clean hand on him. And I love those type of running backs. Mm-hmm. I think Benson has a little more upside, a little more size. So I think Benson could take a little more of a beating. I get a little scared that Wright might be more of the 1B than the 1A. But I still have Wright, I think, relatively high from where he's going in fantasy redrafts, in rookie mocks, all that. So I'm in.
There was, and I'll be honest with you, I do not know the size difference, but there is talk about, and I know several high stakes players I talked to were worried about Devon Achane holding up because of his size in the NFL. Is Jaylen Wright about Achane size, or is he even smaller than him?
He's a little bit bigger, actually.
Okay.
So I don't think Brooks is probably the guy where there might be some size concerns. Okay. I think Wright is smaller, more compact, but I'm interested to see what the weigh-in at the combine goes. I think he'll come in over 200 pounds, and that's really all we need.
I want to say it was on your feed, and I can't remember if it was you saying this on X or somebody else, but somebody compared Will Shipley, the Clemson running back, to Tank Bigsby, who was on the Jaguars this past year, which flashback a year ago, we're probably okay with that comp. Right. Now not so much. Will Shipley in 36 games for Clemson caught 85 passes. He's gotten the end zone over 30 times. He averaged 5.2 plus yards per carry. This is on Clemson, and this is not like your older brother's Clemson, where it was Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence and all these Clemson teams dominating. This was a little bit of a different Clemson team. Will Shipley, currently you have him as your number 6 running back. Where does this guy go? Is this a 5th or 6th round pick that you're just drafting for depth, or is there something more here from Shipley?
Yeah, I think you're hoping maybe 4th round, maybe can bump up a little bit. I mean, he was a top recruit coming out of high school. He was supposed to be the next Christian McCaffrey. That was Will Shipley. Like coming out of high school, he was the pass catching white running back who's gonna just blaze and kill you. And he certainly can catch. I love his contact balance. I mean, he stays upright through contact. He's tough. Every time I watch Will Shipley, I'm like, he's tough. Like at the goal line, he'll go for it. But just not explosive, just really slow to get up to the line. I mean, that could be killer in the NFL if those big nose tackles are faster than you at that initial point of attack. So that's kind of my fear. I like him. I think fantasy, he might end up being one of those better fantasy running backs than real NFL running backs, where he's getting peppered with 5-6 targets a game because he can catch the ball and is a willing pass blocker. So I think he could end up being a steal fantasy wise more than, probably the NFL is not going to be a lead back anywhere.
Which is fine because we're all about fantasy. And if I've said this for years, there are so many high stakes players that not necessarily with your first running back, but that second running back, you just crave reception production. Like that is what you're after there, and he could be that guy. Now, speaking of reception production, let me tell you about Bucky Irving, the guy who kind of was one of the guys that helped take over for Trey Benson in Oregon. 186 carries, almost 1,200 yards, 11 touchdowns. But mother of God, Shane, 400-plus yards through the air, 56 catches. This is a guy who started his career in Minnesota, transferred to Oregon, back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. 5'10". He's coming out a year early, which you love to see. Yet you have him below Shipley. You have him below Jaylen Wright. What's the hang-up with Bucky Irving? Because I see this pass production, and I'm going crazy thinking that, man, I could get this guy in maybe the third round of my rookie draft. Your thoughts on Irving?
I mean, I think Irving has all the upside in the world. I think we could be looking back in 2 years and say Bucky Irving's the most productive running back from the class for our fantasy team. Like, it definitely could happen because he has the receiving ability. He has the explosive ability. I love it. I think Bucky Irving, he's not going to run between the tackles. You know, he does not handle traffic well, and he is one of the worst pass blocking running backs I've scouted probably in the past 3 or 4 years. Like, he can't block. You know, maybe today's NFL, it's not as big of a deal as it used to be, but I still feel like if you put Bucky Irving in, you're just tipping your hand, right, as what he's going to do and what you're going to do. And that has me scared. So I have him a little lower. I think for fantasy, I'd probably bump him up past Shipley. You know, I'd rather have him Shipley in a rookie draft, for example, or a redraft. But I think there's a lot of NFL downside where he may not be able to see the field because of some of those little things.
What, in your opinion, is pass blocking something that can be coached? Like, can you take a guy who, again, is like a train wreck as far as pass blocking goes with Bucky Irving, and you get him in the right system? Can he be coached up where you can get him on the field and you don't know as a defensive coordinator what they're going to do because Irving's out there because he's been able to become a better pass blocker? Or is the track record for players who have not been good pass blockers in college, is it so bad as they transfer to the NFL that you just kind of like, it's not worth hoping for because most of them just never get it?
I think it's something that could be improved. You're not going to turn from, Bucky Irving into, into the best pass blocking running back in the league. You might be able to get Irving into a spot where he can be willing enough and stop, a defender enough that you don't have to have him always going out and, running or catching. But I think it's hard, and it's hard when a guy is going to be under 200 pounds. If it's a bigger guy, I can get him there. Bucky Irving, I think, is going to be harder to get there.
A guy who is a little bit more substantial than Bucky Irving is Audric, and I might be butchering this. Is it Estime from Notre Dame? Estime? Okay,
correct.
That's what I thought. As you can tell, I did not watch a ton of Notre Dame football this past year. Audric Estime, I have seen being drafted, and I'll go to the Fantasy Mojo on this, fantasymojo.com, a website you should be subscribing to if you're playing in the FFPC. According to the ADP here, Audric Estime, running back 50, he is the going in the 14th round. That's a redraft. I look at him, Shane, as far as what he was able to do at Notre Dame. 3 seasons, 26 catches. Not great, Bob. I don't love that. But he did put up 1,300-plus rushing yards this year, 18 touchdowns. He did that, and I feel like his body is more suited to being a 3-down back in the NFL, but maybe his skill set relegates him to first and second down. Audric Estime, I'll let you go off on him.
Yeah, I think he's a kind of a classic old 2-down back. I think if he was in the draft 20 years ago, we're talking about a second-round pick in the NFL draft, right? And I think today he's not going to hit the home run. He's not going to score a big play, but he can churn you out 3 yards a carry. He can kind of get that. I think teams need that, right? I think he can get enough usage, maybe gets goal line work, and hey, it's enough that he could be Jamal Williams, and we could be happy with what Estime brings to the table. I just think that ceiling's low if you're not catching the football and you're not going to play all 3 downs. Maybe with a good offensive line, it could happen, but I don't have faith.
The last draft I did in the KFFSC redraft league, the first rookie running back I took was Marshawn Lloyd out of USC. Marshawn Lloyd, I feel like, is a player that I don't want to compare him to Kyron Williams because what Kyron Williams did in his second year with Los Angeles, you just don't compare stuff like that. But I feel like he's a slept-on guy. He's a player that I don't think is ever going to develop into an elite running back, but I do think in the right situation, AKA if the starter goes down in front of him, I could see this guy coming through with, a 15 to 20 point week if he's the featured back, which might be all you need to get you through that week. As far as Dynasty goes, Shane, Marshawn Lloyd, can you tell us a little bit about him?
I like Marshawn Lloyd. I know I have him ranked kind of lower here, but I think the upside, like you said, is there. I think Marshawn Lloyd, another top recruit, has the athletic skill set. I mean, over 7 yards a carry for USC this year. Scored a ton of touchdowns, had a ton of big runs. He has 2 ACL injuries in his past high school, and then his first year in college, which I think is a question. I want to see what the medical works out. So that has him a little bit lower. I think he could definitely rise up my rankings if everything checks out at the combine and the combine rechecks there. He's not a guy that's caught a ton of passes. He's never had a 1,000-yard rushing season. There's a lot of unknown with Marshawn Lloyd, and what that does, it gives you a wide range. Because I'm with you. I think the talent is there. Give him a good offense, and I think we could see Marshawn Lloyd could be the best running back in this class. So I'm definitely not writing that off.
Speaks to the depth of the class to say that with a guy who you have currently ranked as your number 9 running back. Okay, the last aspect I want to get into with running backs, I'll let you take this however you want to go. We didn't talk about Ray Davis from Kentucky. If you want to give us your thoughts on him, Kendall Milton in Georgia, any of the other sleepers that we should be knowing for day 3 of the NFL draft.
Yeah, let me toss Dylan Labe, the running back from New Hampshire, out there. Set the FBS record for receiving yards in a game by a running back against, I think it was Western Michigan against a MAC team. So he was playing an FBS team, but set that record. 5'10", 207. I think he's going to run in the 4.4s, and he's a pass. When you talk about pass catching, Dylan Labe might be the best pass catching running back in the class, right up there with Bucky Irving. That's he's small school. It's going to be a tough transition, but in the Senior Bowl, I think he matched day 1 up to snuff. So I think he's a real sleeper. You should take in 4th, 5th round of rookie drafts. You might have a pass catching monster on your hands.
Yeah, I think you're right. I did not realize that, but quite frankly, how many people are well-versed in New Hampshire football, unless you're Shane Hallam from Draft Countdown and Draft Sharks. Follow him on the X at Shane P. Hallam. Let's step out and take a break for the top of the hour here. When we come back, this is the big meaty segment I wanted to get to, a wide receiver class that is really, really good. Mile High Luke already has a question about Malik Nabers. I want to get into Xavier Worthy and maybe a little bit of Roman Wilson and Lad McConkey as well. Shane Hallam from Draft Countdown, Draft Sharks. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. Stick around. You're watching the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour on the Better Sports Network. We got a lot of great content for you coming up next.
Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament is already open right now over at FFPC. Drafts are available daily, 2-hour clock or 6-hour clock, or the sit and go 30-second clock if you really just want to bang out a draft. Those are scheduled in advance, so you can go get set up on that. Take a shot, either $25,000 or $10,000 grand prize. That's in the Never Too Early Best Ball contest. They got some big prizes over there, man. And you can play high stakes games over there too. So you can hit this QR code that's right in front of my face, or go to myffpc.com. Use promo code COOP, COOP. They'll give you $25 off when you deposit $35 or more. So go get set up right now. We're doing, we already do our Dynasty, we do our redrafts over there, we do our high stakes stuff, but we do the playoff contest, we do it all. So I'm going to get into the best ball too. It's never, for me, whatever you got, whatever contest you got, I'm going to play, I'm going to win. That's it. So go over to myffpc.com, use promo code COOP, and you can win as well.
We are back with you live here on the Better Sports Network, High Stakes Fantasy Football Show. Eric Balkman, Shane Hallam. Shane Hallam from Draft Countdown at Shane P. Hallam on the X machine. Can we talk about what you're doing with Draft Sharks here? Because a lot of people on the show know Draft Sharks. We've had, my goodness, Jared Smola, Matt Schauf, C.H. Hearns we've had on. We've had on so many other people from Alex Korf, obviously from Draft Sharks. What are you doing with Draft Sharks this year? And could the content be adding Debbie to Draft Sharks going forward there on that website?
Yeah, I'm excited. They brought me in to help out. Me and Herms have pushed for some Devi content, so we combined our brains and put out a Devi ranking, the first ever at Draft Sharks. So if you want to see the next couple classes of players, you can check it out there. But I'm also going to be handling a lot some of the rookie content, rookie write-ups. So I'm working right now on JJ McCarthy and Will Shipley for them. So you can look forward to that.
I will look forward to that, as well as asking you about, and we're going to get to Malik Nabers in a second, but we have to talk about Marvin Harrison Jr., a player that, and I'll tell you this, Shane, you've been drafting in the Never Too Early tournament. Marvin Harrison Jr. has an ADP of 303 right now. Wide receiver 13. Only 12 receivers are going in front of him, and he's a rookie. He's never done at this level. Now, his father has, but he has not. Marvin Harrison Jr., Never Too Early ADP, 303, too high. And is he the slam dunk 101 pick in rookie drafts, a non-superflex rookie drafts, no matter where he gets drafted?
303 is a little rich for me. I don't know if I could do it. I do think Marvin Harrison is on the level as a prospect of some of the top guys that I've graded, like AJ Green, really reminiscent of AJ Green's game. We know how good he was from step one, day one for fantasy for a decade. Like, I think Marvin Harrison could pay off at that ADP, but it's just too much without knowing the landing spot for me to take a receiver at 303 when you're not getting any type of value. I just don't think Marvin Harrison rises from there. Almost, where does he end up? Arizona, New England, Chicago. Like, I don't know if any of those places make him a second-round pick.
Okay, so that's Harrison. For dynasty leagues, for Harrison, mother of God, the sky's the limit for this guy, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think he is the 101. As we'll talk about with Malik Nabers, I think when we get to rookie drafts, it's going to be more a 60-40 split. I think Harrison will be the 60%. That's my prediction, that people are going to talk up Malik Nabers enough to have them be pretty darn close, and people will kind of make decisions based off of team landing spot, which I think could give you a nice value on Marvin Harrison Jr. ultimately, because I think he's rock solid. He played with Kyle McCord, who now is the starting quarterback at Syracuse. Right. That's who Marvin Harrison played with and almost took them to an undefeated season. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. can play with Tommy DeVito and be an all-pro.
So let's talk about Nabers. Speaking of playing with DeVito, because that's a realistic possibility for Malik Nabers here this year. So Nabers is a guy that kind of came on throughout the season. Ended up breaking the career receiving record for the Tigers, and is the de facto second receiver off the board. He's your number 2 ranked receiver. I'm going to ask you about Nabers in the frame of this question from Mile High Luke. So he's in a FFPC Dynasty League, non-superflex. You only start one quarterback. He's already got Mahomes, Gibbs, Puka Nacua. He has the 103. He wants to know if you think it would be worthwhile to trade up to the 102. And if he trades up to the 102, ostensibly he is doing that to try to get Nabers, assuming MHJ goes 1 overall. Nabers would be the second pick. Is there a deep yawning chasm between 102 and 103 for you, given the talent of Nabers and a guy who you clearly like here, Shane?
I think there's a big step. I'm not sure the chasm is giant from 102 to 103, but I do think it's worth inquiring, right? Because sometimes moving up that one pick, even we kind of have players in that position. We know who's going where at this point already. Sometimes moving up one pick, the other guy might look at it like, I could do that, right? It might not cost as much as it should. I would definitely try. My 103s, I have set some soft offers up for the 102 to get Nabers or Harrison. I think is worth it. But I wouldn't pay the farm. I wouldn't give up the 103 and the 106 to move up to the 102. I don't think it's that type of chasm when you have Brock Bowers, who we'll talk about, and Rome Odunze, we're going to talk about next in the receiver group.
Is the distance talent-wise between 101 and 102 bigger than between the 102 and 103? Again, not non-superflex.
No. I think Harrison and Nabers are fairly close. I think they're fairly close in terms of talent. So I would, if I was Luke, I would start with an offer of the 106 and the 203. And maybe if you have a bench player that you can toss in there that is worthwhile. If that gets it done, then I think it was worth moving up the one pick. I don't know if I'd pay much more than that, though.
The great thing is if you're offering to move up to the 102 from the 103, the 102 is a team that should be, based on the draft order, slightly worse than you and the second worst team in the league, which means they probably need more assets here. And they're just sliding down one pick. You're giving them a second round pick. You're giving them another first round pick and potentially another player. So that could get it done. Luke, that's the thing. It's like, every league is different, but to try to move up, 103, 106, and the 203 to move up one spot with Nabers, it might get it done, and it might be worthwhile as well. That's Nabers, Rome Odunze. We talked about him briefly when we were talking about Michael Penix in the first hour tonight. Odunze is an interesting guy because in a normal wide receiver class, he might be the first wide receiver off the board. He does everything well, polished route runner, good hands. He did put up some insane numbers based on the defenses that they were going up against, but you cannot deny Odunze's talent. This is a special player, Shane.
He is. He has the size, the athleticism to boot along with all of that. So all that combined, I think Rome Odunze is going to be a top 15 pick in the NFL draft, has a shot to be a top 8 pick in the NFL draft. So he might go one pick after Malik Nabers. And then you're like, yeah, well, the 103 is not so bad anymore when you have another top 10 receiver there. My questions on Odunze and why I think there is a gap between Harrison, Nabers, and Odunze is just the offense that Washington runs is kind of the old, stack them up. And like we saw with Jalen Hyatt last year, remember from Tennessee, very similar offense that where you kind of have the stack on the side, so you're never going to get a double team. You're sometimes going to get wide open. I think Odunze had the skill set to make that work, but it's a big transition to a more pro style offense. So I have some fear. I'm a little lower on Odunze than some of the general dynasty consensus, but I still think he's a clear number 3 quarterback wide receiver in this class.
The guy you have after him, Troy Franklin, and this for me is where I see a little bit of a drop off in talent. I still like the top 3. Franklin, I'm kind of like, I don't know. Franklin did catch 81 passes, just under 1,400 yards. He got in the end zone 14 times this past year. He was a semifinalist for the Biletnikoff Award. All good things, all great things. Statistically speaking, you consider the offense, you consider the defense that he was going up against. Troy Franklin still ranks as your number 4 receiver. I've heard some bad comps, and not that I know. I'm just saying like comps to not too underwhelming players, we'll say. Guys that were speed merchants but never really developed into becoming really good receivers in the NFL. But I feel like your outlook on Troy Franklin is a little bit more rosy. Can you tell us why?
I think the difference here is, he came in as a top recruit, and with the offense at Oregon definitely had the deep shots where the speed of Troy Franklin at 6'2", and he was pushing. I think he's listed at under 190. Definitely helped, but they also had some short passes. They used him a lot in the screen game. They used him a lot in the way that I think the NFL will like to use him, kind of like we saw with Zay Flowers in Baltimore, right? Scripting some plays to get the ball into space. I think Troy Franklin could be that. But the fantasy downside of just being a deep threat, being a Jameson Williams, and you're hoping for the one catch a game that could happen too. So I definitely think there's a drop off here. But I like Franklin. I think Franklin will have more success than what people are kind of giving him credit for. I think he is more well-rounded than Oregon let him on. And I think the offense just kind of, we didn't get to see a lot of it.
So maybe a little bit of a value here with Troy Franklin, given that other people are down on him.
I've taken him. I took him in my never too early best ball. Like I'll especially for those best ball even redraft leagues. I think you can get the big shot, and maybe if he goes in the first round, we're talking late first round. We're talking the Kansas City Chiefs. We're talking a good situation that might push him to be a good value in dynasty and redraft.
Let's talk about Xavier Worthy here. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know a ton about this guy, but I've had smart people tell me that this is a guy to be paying attention to when he gets to the next level. Not only as an effective receiver, but a guy who might be able to develop into somebody's number 1 receiver. What do you know about Xavier Worthy, Shane, that you can enlighten us?
Um, I mean, the comp, it's. I guess it feels lazy, but I see it. I see Hollywood Brown in college in Oklahoma. Like that's what Xavier Worthy does. Is just he's not big, but man, he can move so fluidly. Plus, he has 4.3 speed. That's really hard to cover, and we're learning that in the NFL. It's hard to cover. Now, Worthy had a broken hand 2 years ago. He drops so many passes, and I'm not a guy that like dogs guys for dropping passes too much. I don't knock it. And I don't think it's as big a deal as we make it, but like it was bad for the last 2 years. So once again, you need a system that's going to take a guy that's 170 pounds soaking wet and be able to utilize him well. I don't think that's every system in the NFL. So I think it's a risk fantasy wise. I'd probably knock him down a pig in fantasy, but yeah, I mean, he could develop into a Marquise Brown where he could get a ton of targets, and he's the weapon for your team.
A weapon for LSU this last year was Brian Thomas Jr., and he was not the number one weapon because it was Malik Nabers, a guy we already previously talked about. So now this is the difficulty in evaluating these super deep, talented SEC teams. Brian Thomas Jr., did he do it on his own merit? Did he do it because defenses were more concerned with Malik Nabers? Did he do it because he had such a talented quarterback in Jayden Daniels? The majority of the time, and all the mocks I look at, he's still a first-round wide receiver here, Shane. Brian Thomas Jr., I guess just because he's on LSU with these other guys, we can't be sleeping on him, can we?
No, I think he's going to be drafted higher than Troy Franklin and Xavier Worthy. I mean, I think Brian Thomas is a rock-solid first-round pick, led college football in receiving touchdowns this year. The problem I have with Brian Thomas, he's kind of Quentin Johnston-esque, which I know is like the poison apple, right, to say. But yeah. Brian Thomas didn't start playing football till he was a sophomore in high school. He is very raw. He's just using the athletic skills he has to get by, and it worked this year. You saw it play out. A guy that's 6'4", 210, and can be a deep threat. Like, that's exciting. We don't have a lot of that in the NFL. But I think you also have a player that's not ready to step in as the wide receiver one for a team and just dominate off the snap when he's still very raw. So I'm lower on him than a lot of others. I think he'll still be drafted in the top 20, 25 picks of the NFL draft. But there's a lot of risk involved with Brian Thomas.
You know, not only risk, but like I think it's like even fans of Brian Thomas will tell you because he is a little bit of a late bloomer, there is a development curve. There is a development timeline that maybe some of these other guys don't have to undergo. And with development timelines, like FFPC Dynasty leagues are not like these deep, squads where you can have 25, 30 players on the team. Like each spot is valuable. And when it comes down to you in the first round or maybe the second round of your rookie draft, do you want to take a guy like Brian Thomas Jr., who you might think is probably going to have to take a mulligan in 2024, and then you don't know how effective he's going to be in 2025? Or are you going to take somebody else there? I think that's a question that we have to answer. Now, let's keep it in the SEC, but talk about a player who actually had a bad year last year, but he's still expected to be a high draft pick this year, and that's Ladd McConkey. Ladd McConkey is a player that I have heard from smart people, high-stakes players, that they're actually fans of his, not only from Dynasty, but for redraft purposes. If you look at his season this past year compared to what he did in 2022, it was awful. He played in almost twice as many games in 2022 than 2023. 710 yards in 2022. That dipped below 500 this past year. Got in the end zone 7 times 2 years ago. Last year, only twice. I think, and this isn't an accurate comp, but I think it's worth mentioning that Dontavian Wicks would have been a second round, maybe a first round pick. I don't know. I think that might be a stretch. Had he not had the season in 2023 that he did, new offense, new OC, new quarterback, new head, there's so much new stuff going on there. And I think that's why Wicks slid. Is McConkey actually a value for Dynasty players this year, given that he is a proven player coming off a bad year for the Georgia Bulldogs, Shane?
I think so. I had him much lower coming into the year because of the injury, and then he didn't play very well. And then the Florida game, if you want to go watch one game from Ladd McConkey, go watch him against Florida in 2023. I mean, they can't cover him. Like the footwork from the slot is so good with Ladd McConkey. And a lot of people have like Carson Beck, the Georgia quarterback, is the top quarterback in 25. That's why I don't think there's a first round quarterback in 2025. Like Ladd McConkey's stats should have been better this year, and I don't think it's all on Ladd McConkey that his stats weren't as good. I think we saw it at the Senior Bowl. He had a very Tank Dell Senior Bowl, right, where he's just getting open every single rep because guys can't, know what he's going to do because the sharpness of the cuts is so good. I think Ladd McConkey gets in a high volume offense as a slot receiver this year. We could be talking, about catching 60 balls.
Wow, and it's very valuable. It's very valuable to have a player like that in your team too, for redraft and dynasty in McConkey. Roman Wilson. I had a guy on one of my other shows, Donnell Anthony, who was one of the top finishers in the FFPC Never Too Early Superflex Best Ball Tournament, and I asked him about rookies this year, like because he obviously hit on some rookies last year in January and February to help him to a really good finish. So I said, okay, what about some rookies this year? And I think I know he brought up McConkey, but I think the first guy he brought up, and I have to go back and listen to it, I think it was Roman Wilson out of Michigan, another national champion, a guy that maybe has in addition to a pretty good college career, Shane, might have a promising career in the NFL as well.
He has the speed. He has the athletic ability. There are so many times that the play for Michigan was J.J. McCarthy takes the snap, runs to the right, and tosses it in the flat to Roman Wilson. Like that was the play, where you're not covering him. Getting him in space after the catch was so good. Once again, volume was the issue. Michigan was running the football a lot. So Roman Wilson never looked like a top receiver, but had 12 touchdowns, had some contested catch touchdowns. He's not going to be a number one for a team, but like McConkey, I think you put Roman Wilson in the slot. I think he's going to be super hard to cover and could be kind of a volume monster. And that's why I think those two guys are real redraft values and probably going to be dynasty values in round 2 of rookie drafts.
Are McConkey and Wilson almost coin flips for you? Like as far as which one's going to have the better career?
Yeah, I have McConkey's rated 33rd on my big board. Roman Wilson's rated 34th on my big board.
Oh, okay. All right. So there you go. Literally a coin flip. Let's get back to Florida State. I love talking Florida State Seminoles. Keon Coleman, the transfer from Michigan State, who came to Florida State this year and in Tallahassee, 50 catches, 650 plus yards, and 11 touchdowns. Opted out of that bowl game against Georgia. Who didn't? Everybody did for Florida State. I had a guy, one of my buddies was telling me, this was back in like October. So, a long time ago. But he was saying, I think the text to me was Keon Coleman, WR2 question mark, as in like second receiver off the board. I was like, well, listen, I love my Coleman. I don't think I see that. And now I for sure don't see it a couple of months later. But there is something there. He's 6'4", not a small guy, and played pretty well both at Michigan State. You can make the case that he played better with the Spartans than he did with Florida State at Tallahassee. Keon Coleman, as far as a dynasty player, is he a first-round pick for you this year, Shane? And what kind of career is he going to have?
He's not. I think Keon Coleman is a question mark. Because like you said, Michigan State, I think a lot of people in the Devy community especially were pretty high on him coming into college despite not being a top recruit, and he flashed the size and athleticism of Michigan State. This year, we saw him go off week 1 against LSU. We're like, wow, he's beating this SEC defense. Well, we saw the LSU defense for the rest of the season. They were god-awful. It wasn't too much to write home about. My question is, Keon Coleman had so many games. He didn't catch a pass against Boston College. He had so many games where he wasn't even utilized. I felt like Florida State used him poorly. I would have liked to see him run some slants, be Michael Thomas. And they would just throw him something down the field, and that's it. So my question is that Coleman? Is it his issue? Was it an offense issue? I'm not sure, but there are games where he disappears and can't get off of coverage. And if that happens in the NFL, I think it's a question. I think he's more going to be an NFL round 2 pick. So I worry he has more production, but I worry about a Jonathon Mingo, right, where it's size and speed, and it just can't get open and get those nuances. But Coleman could explode. He has that kind of upside.
Real quick on Mingo, is that guy ever going to be the number 1 receiver for Carolina, or is he a number 2 at best?
I think not anymore. I think they just fired the coach who picked him for the Michael Pittman role, and now that coach is gone. Okay. I think it's bad. It's bad news for Mingo there.
Bad news for Mingo. Is it good news for Adonai Mitchell? Because he is no longer going to be in Xavier Worthy's shadow in the NFL. Now he might be in somebody else's shadow. But my goodness, Texas, pretty much if you were a Texas receiver, you're in the NFL draft this year. They're losing everybody. He started his career, Mitchell, at Georgia, came over to Texas for this past year, 55 catches, 840 plus yards, and 11 touchdowns on the season. And I look at him and I've seen him mocked at the end of the first round in some drafts. I know you have him lower than that. Is it because Xavier Worthy just outshined him the majority of the time at Texas, or are there other flaws to his game that you're actually concerned about going into the NFL?
I think Adonai Mitchell has plenty of. I mean, 6'4", he's big, he's long. I think an issue was just inconsistency. Like, he's an X type of receiver, but doesn't really have the weight to beat the jam. But I mean, when Adonai Mitchell gets off the line clean, I mean, he gets separation. He can beat you deep. He can come in and make a quick cut. Out routes. There's a lot of things he does really, really well. So I think in the right offense, Adonai Mitchell could be great. The rare transfer from Georgia to Texas, and having some success in both places, but really got to shine this year. So I think the upside's there. It's a great receiver class, right? Like, all these guys are good, even if they're ranked down the bottom of the top 10. And I think Mitchell's another one of those. And luckily for Texas, they brought in 2 of the top 3 transfer receivers for next year. So they're just reloading right off the bat.
Well, when you have Arch Manning there, you sort of have to. Otherwise, you run the risk of losing him to USC or Ohio State or God knows who. Okay, that is the top 10 receivers you have. I want to touch on some of these other guys outside of your top 10, and I'll lead it off with Malachi Corley from Western Kentucky. Now, Corley is a player that put up huge numbers with the Hilltoppers. 73 catches in 2021 for just under 700 yards. His biggest season, 2 years ago, 2022, 101 catches, 1,293 yards, and 11 touchdowns. This past year, he still had 11 touchdowns, failed to touch 1,000 yards receiving, and failed to get 80-plus receptions on the year. Played in 2 fewer games. I'm sure that had something to do with it. 5'11", 210, not a big guy, not a guy who's probably going to win on the perimeter, but still, for fantasy purposes, Shane, a guy that we need to know.
I mean, he is rocked up. There's a rocked up 210 who's hard to bring down. You're going to hear the comp for Malachi Corley, Deebo Samuel coming out of college, very similar players. If you go back to 2022, I mean, Malachi Corley ran the ball 11 times in eight yards per carry average rushing the football. He can run. He can take a lot of those screen passes. Like, he has the upside to be a number 1, number 2 receiver on an NFL team and have some pretty good volume to boot. I don't think you want to ignore him. But the Western Kentucky jumps a little bit big. Does he have the height? He's short. So I don't think he fits everywhere.
I think that Corley, you kind of know if you're drafting him, you kind of have expectations like, okay, this guy is not the next Tyreek Hill or Steve Smith or anything like that. He could be, probably not. But a guy that's really interesting is a player that we touched on in the first hour, Devontae Walker, a player that could not play because the NCAA was preventing him from playing. And this is a player that I think the range of outcomes for him are quite a bit bigger than Corley. This is not a slap. You're not looking for a slap hit single. This could be a home run pick at the end of your second, early third round of your Dynasty rookie draft, maybe even later than that. Devontae Walker, yes, he was catching passes from Drake Maye, but he has standalone talent there that I think we need to discuss.
Yeah, and catching those passes, I mean, he was the go-to target because he was by far the best target. A lot of people loved Josh Downs last year, who had some productive games. I think Devontae Walker's Josh Downs with athleticism. Like, he's going to have he's going to have a higher RAS score than Josh Downs did, and has that slot ability to just run himself open with route running. So I think the upside's definitely there. Had kind of a rough end of the season when teams, I think, kind of figured out how to beat him at the line. Had a rough Senior Bowl week. He dropped a ton of passes and struggled to get open. So I think there's some downside, but yeah, I mean, I think the upside to be a volume receiver, had 11 catches in a game this season. We're talking another slot guy who could be a top volume getter for his offense.
Interesting. Okay. Good knowledge on Walker there. Let's go back to Washington and talk about Jaylen Polk. What can we tell us, our viewers tonight about Polk that we didn't already say about Odunze? 6'2", what is he? 6'2", 204. He's got the size. This is a player that had his best season this past year. 69 catches, a shade under 1,200 yards, 9 touchdowns, as not the first option in Washington. Yeah, I know Michael Penix threw for like 800 yards every game, but this is still something we should be pointing out here. Jaylen Polk, third rounder, where do you see him going in the draft?
Yeah, I think he's third, maybe falls to the early fourth, depending on because of the depth of the class. But I think Polk wasn't talked about before the season. He was the third option behind Odunze and Jalen McMillan, who's also in this class. But, I mean, Polk made it work. He got open. I thought he got open more consistently than Odunze did. Now, Odunze is better after the catch, but I think Polk has a lot better idea of spacing in the defense, how to get open against zone coverage. Would really fit like a Pittsburgh Steelers type, Deontay Johnson type of player where, the quickness at a good size makes him really dangerous when playing against zone coverage and has some man ability. That's kind of what I see with Jaylen Polk.
Keep it in the Pac-12 here, Shane. Jacob Cowing, right? Not Coing. It's Cowing. That's
yes.
Sorry. Thank you. Arizona, 5'11", 175, 90 catches this year, but he failed to get 900 yards. Did get in the end zone 13 times. Are we looking at another slot guy here and as maybe one of the first wide receivers off the board on day 3?
Yeah, slot guy. And I'd say Cowing is one of the best route runners in the class. I mean, he is a crisp cutter. And, I know Todd Burrows likes Cowing a lot. He likes that trait. And that trait can sometimes win even if you're not in the best system or not in the best position. You can get open. You can get easy balls. So I like Cowing. I think Cowing has some upside. But, yeah, he's thin. And he's not necessarily, he's not going to be a number one guy. So I think he's worth a rookie pick. I think he's one of those rookie shots to take in the third round of your rookie drafts where he could end up working out in a system that needs receivers.
Jalen McMillan, who you were just talking about when we were talking about Jaylen Polk, has fallen to the third wide receiver off the board for you, or at least not off the board, but third Washington Huskies receiver, number 15. Is it because of Polk that you and his performance this year that you had to downgrade McMillan because if Polk and Odunze are dwarfing him as far as production, as far as what he's been doing on the field, then we have to move him down in our rankings as well. Jalen McMillan, number 3 for Washington. Could it be the number 2 or number 3 receiver for an NFL team?
Yeah, I think he's a good number 3 for an NFL team, kind of more deep threat-esque. Just I expected more this season, and Polk kind of stole the thunder because he was so good. Like you said, I think McMillan's kind of a one-trick pony, and probably for fantasy, not a great trick that he can catch the deep ball for a touchdown. Probably doesn't help us too much.
There's 2 other sleeper receivers before I turn it over to you with anybody else you want to talk about. I have seen Ricky Pearsall out of Florida being drafted in the Never Too Early tournament a few times, 19th round, 18th round. So he's basically free, 88th receiver off the board. Why do we need to know him not only for redraft, but for Dynasty as well, Shane?
Another dominant Senior Bowl performance for him. So I think people, Tank Dell did it. So let me grab that guy that won at the Senior Bowl. Pearsall is another very crisp route runner, and Florida, Graham, you're Graham Mertz. You know what you get with Graham Mertz throwing you the football. Like Ricky Pearsall still had success despite the Florida offense. So I think he is another kind of slot receiver who can get open, and maybe there's some hope that you can have a 6-catch game here, a 7-catch game, something like that pops once or twice in the best ball. I think is more possible for Pearsall than others.
The other one I want to ask you about, my co-host for the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, Farrell Elliott, who's based out of Louisville and is a huge Louisville Cardinal fan, has been talking my ear off basically for the last month about Jamari Thrash, who played for the Cardinals this past year. What can you tell me about Jamari Thrash, knowing that you are coming from a much more unbiased standpoint than Farrell Elliott?
No, I like Jamari Thrash. I like the system that they had this year. He transferred up from Georgia State to Louisville, and for a guy that's not super big, Thrash has a great first step off the line, and sometimes he beats those corners right off the line, is like wide open, going deep, or is able to, run an in or post and have success there. I worry about the size. I think he is someone that's going to get pushed around a little bit more in the NFL level than against some of these ACC teams. But has had some huge games throughout his career. I think Thrash could find an NFL role, and maybe if there's an injury or two, we're talking about, hey, this is a good flex plug-in type guy.
We have talked in depth well over a dozen receivers. Are there any other day 3 guys that we as well, not me, but as FFPC Dynasty players who are watching this, that they need to know about for their rookie drafts?
Well, I think you always want to take the greatest receiver of all time, his son. We talked Marvin Harrison Jr., but Brendan Rice from USC, 6'3", 205. I heard he could run in the 4.3s at that size. If that happens, I think we're going to be Jerry Rice's
wheels up.
son. Yeah, wheels up for Brendan Rice. We're talking day 2. So I think he's intriguing. Javon Baker from UCF, an Alabama transfer, is getting a lot of hype. He's big, has big hands, very physical at the line of scrimmage. And I like some of the small school guys in this class. Jaylen Coker from Holy Cross is a player to keep in mind. Maybe 6th, 7th round of FFPC rookie drafts. Gets open really easily. I think could be the small school guy that breaks out.
I always look for the deep cuts here. Ty James from Mercer. Wayne Ruby from Division III Mount Union. All good, fun guys to talk about. Brevin Easton from Albany you have on here as well. It's just, and of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't say Kyle Sheets from Slippery Rock. Another one that we're going to get it
45 minutes away from me, Slippery Rock.
Oh, there you go, Slippery Rock. That's fantastic. We went a little overtime with the receivers, but quite frankly, Shane, this is a really good receiver class, is it not?
Yeah, it's phenomenal. You have the top and you have the depth. I think day 3 is a little weak, but day 1, day 2, it's going to be phenomenal.
It is going to be phenomenal, as will our final segment of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show tonight. We talk quarterbacks, running backs, receivers. We have not touched on the tight ends, and tight ends hold a special place in my heart as an employee of the FFPC. I am Eric Balkman from the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, the road of his High Stakes Lowdown on the FFPC. He's Shane Hallam from Draft Sharks and Draft Countdown. At Shane P. Hallam on the X. Don't go anywhere. When we come back, we're talking Brock Bowers, Jatavian Sanders, and maybe some more sleepers that you'll want to know for your FFPC rookie drafts. This is the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network.
If you're not playing Dynasty Fantasy Football right now, where we're still out there doing all sorts of trades and moves, everybody else that does like casual gamers that do redraft, they're done, and they're just kind of speculating or like talking about the draft. We're still playing. Like if you play Dynasty, we play all year. I play over at FFPC. If you want to play there, use promo code COOP, C-O-O-P. We'll give you $25 when you deposit $35 or more at myffpc.com. And there's 2 ways to jump in over there. You can either do a startup, in which case you can get Dalton Kincaid way after guys like Sam Laporta and Trey McBride. Brock Bowers, I just saw that the rookie Brock Bowers, even before the draft, they're projecting him to go as like the tight end 2 in these startup drafts. Crazy, right? Like right after Laporta, which is nuts. Like you can get Kincaid, or if you don't want to do a startup, I think this is even more fun. You go out and take over an orphan team, right? So over at FFPC, they never close the leagues down. They just take the teams and if somebody has to leave or whatever, then you can buy in and take that team. So you can go find a team that has Kincaid and a bunch of players you like, and you keep those players, and then you look at all the other players you don't like, and you have the golden opportunity to trade them away. Like it's so much fun to take a team and be like, okay, you know what? Because if you do a startup, you love all the guys already. Like those are your babies. If you do an orphan team, then you can trade away all the guys you don't like, and that's even more fun. Honestly, you have the golden, the green light there. So go to myffpc.com. Use promo code COOP. They'll give you $25 when you deposit $35 or more, and you'll give you a leg up versus starting your own league. Now you got to chase people down for dues. You got to pay your own money. So go get set up over there.
Final segment of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network tonight. 21 minutes until the top of the hour. Shane Hallam from Draft Countdown and Draft Sharks, joined by me, Eric Balkman from the FFPC. Hey, by the way, I just want to take a time out to tell you about the Fantasy Alarm All-Pro subscription. You can get it right now. Unlock all content from all sports, including annual draft guides, one-on-one expert access in the Discord. You can analyze matchups and trends in your league when you sync up your league with it. The lineup generator is integrated with fan injections as well. Daily rankings, weekly rankings, the value vault position coaches are all there. Waiver wire, ownership percentages, projection stats, and tools at Fantasy Alarm. Build better lineups, guaranteed. That it says it right in there. Get access to everything Fantasy Alarm offers all year. Use promo code LOCK, LOCK, at fantasyalarm.com/lock. That's fantasyalarm.com/lock. The tight end class in 2023 was baller, Shane. Absolutely. I mean, Laporta and you think about Dalton Kincaid and what he was able to offer, and Michael Mayer flashed at the end, Luke Musgrave, Tucker Kraft, the two Packers guys as well. There was a lot of talent. Brock Bowers was not in that year's class, but had he been in that year's class, where would he have ranked with all these other tight ends?
I mean, before the year, he would have been by far the number one tight end in the class. I honestly don't know if you could beat what Sam Laporta did as a rookie, but I think Brock Bowers has similar upside to that, because you have a player in Brock Bowers from Georgia who's not just a receiver. He's running reverses for 60 yards for a touchdown. He's doing a lot of unique things that a unique offensive mind could really do well with. And you know what? He's not an amazing blocker, but Brock Bowers can block. Like he's going to get on the field immediately. So I tweeted this out, and now it's been over a year and a half ago. I think Brock Bowers will be what we wanted Kyle Pitts to be from a fantasy perspective. Oh. I think Bowers is going to be able to transcend because he is more pure receiver and has such a unique skill set.
Okay, that said, here's the question. Tight end premium, rookie drafts in the FFPC. How high should Brock Bowers go? Shane, if you were picking, like if you had every pick, how high would you take Bowers? When does he come off the board for you?
I think he's 103 or 104. I probably right now I'm leaning 103. I mean, we'll see where him and Odunze end up, but I think they're neck and neck to me. If Odunze is a top 10 pick, I think it's going to be tough to pass. But I think Brock Bowers, that kind of success at tight end in the FFPC tight end premium is hard to get. I would much rather take the chance. So 103. Harrison, Nabers, Bowers, let's go.
Okay, so this is interesting. Now you're going to feel like I'm an attorney that's trying to break you down on the stand, but I'm just pointing out some things here. You said that Bowers would have been the number one tight end if you include all these tight ends that went last year. This is a tight end premium format in the FFPC, yet you still think Bowers should be going behind Harrison and Nabers. So the question here is twofold. Why do you love Harrison and Nabers so much? And why do you hate Brock Bowers so much? If he's that good, why are you taking him at the 103 in the tight end premium league, Shane?
Well, I think we all were still a little gun shy on tight ends. Honestly, on first round draft pick tight ends, right? I mean, when was the last first round taken tight end who's really worked out for fantasy football? There's not a long list. Right. So I think there's still some trepidation there. I also think Harrison and Nabers are elite receiver one type of receivers. So to me, that is just a lot safer. As much as I love Brock Bowers, that's a lot safer. And I want that safety. I think when you get to Bowers and Odunze, they both hold the same risk. So give me the tight end with the FFPC. And then honestly, most of my teams, I need a tight end more than I need a receiver. So I still would take Harrison or Nabers, but I think Brock Bowers is right there at the 103.
So he is going at the 508 in redraft in the Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament redraft, which you can sign up for at myffpc.com. Then there is a chasm between him and the next tight end. This is not like last year where there's a lot of tight ends bunched up. Jatavian Sanders, again, this is for redraft. I'll bring it back to Dynasty, I promise. Jatavian Sanders out of Texas, he's not going until 8+ rounds later at the end of the 13th round as tight end 25. Jatavian Sanders is a player, and I think Todd and I were talking about this last week, that if you watch the film, you got to watch the right film, or you got to watch all the film, because there's some games where it seems like he's just catching these dump offs over the middle, and then there's some games where it seems like he's going down the seam and he's going downfield and making plays. So the film on him is spotty, but you see it there. Jatavian Sanders is, I mean, he's obviously the number 2 tight end for you as well. But man, that's a huge difference. 8 rounds between the top rookie tight end and the second best rookie tight end, Shane.
if Bowers wasn't in this class, if he had gone back to school, we'd be talking about maybe one of the worst tight end classes we've ever seen. I mean, it's bad. Like JT Sanders is 6'4", 242, super athletic, but yeah, he doesn't have the production. It's an upside projection for Sanders. I think he came into college as a defensive end, made the switch to tight end, so he's only 3 years into this position. And in 2022, if you go back to the 2022 film, they needed him. They needed more receiving help, right? Then they got Adonai Mitchell and didn't need him anymore, but they actually had plays for JT Sanders, and you can see the upside. 23, we didn't get to see that, and I think it hurt him in his draft stock. I think someone around 2 takes JT Sanders in the NFL draft. It wouldn't surprise me if he falls to round 3. And I think it's the only 2 tight ends that are going day 2, top 100 is Sanders and Bowers. So actually, I don't mind taking JT Sanders that spot in the never too early best ball drafts just for the pure upside. I mean, I think Laporta was fairly raw too, but had a good system. It all depends where they get drafted. But I think there's a big chasm between Bowers and Sanders.
I know this matters for fantasy, but it also doesn't matter for fantasy, Shane. Blocking wise for Sanders, is he a good enough blocker to stay on the field all 3 downs, or does he need some work in that department?
He's one of those players who uses his physical tools to block instead of the finesse and technique to block. So what that means is, he has the strength, he has the size, and was successful in college doing it. But I watch him and I'm like, he doesn't know pad level. Like, he doesn't know how to leg drive, And so I don't mind those guys because you can teach some of those things, I think, to the tight end. But it usually takes time. It's usually why we don't see tight ends break out so early. So that does scare me. I think JT Sanders, if he goes to a team that has a decent, maybe not just decent, but a decent tight end on the squad, it might take him some time to get up to snuff and be on the field.
I want to clarify something with Sanders. You said he had the strength and the size to do that without the technique in college. Does he have the strength and the size to do it necessarily without technique? I guess.
Yeah,
pro technique. Does he have the strength and the size to play tight end in the NFL?
He does. Like it's there. If I was crafting my perfect tight end, we talk about Kyle Pitts, like he looks like the perfect. JT Sanders looks very similar. He looks like the perfect tight end. He has that size. He has that strength, but is just raw, in both blocking and receiving, and that's the issue. Is he could be the old classic. Wait tier 3 for tight ends. And like I said, in the FFPC and Dynasty, even it's hard to hold those guys for 2 years.
Yeah. I like the leagues I play in are the majority of my Dynasty leagues I play in are like private leagues where you can have 22 players on your roster. And then in those leagues, I like to keep 3 tight ends on my roster. I like to have like a borderline top 5 guy, and then another guy who's like a borderline top 12, and then like a project, right? Not a project, but a guy that can marinate for a year. Like Michael Mayer was that guy for me this past year on a few teams where he's my number 3 tight end. I don't necessarily have to count on him, but that is a luxury in the FFPC you may not be able to afford. So just take that with a grain of salt. Moving on to Kansas State, Ben Sinnott. Am I doing that right, Shane?
Yeah,
Sinnott. Ben Sinnott. Okay, so I did not do the pronunciation right. Okay, so Ben Sinnott, 49 catches, 676 yards, 6 touchdowns. He is your number 3 tight end. Is this another pretty big gap between JT Sanders and Sinnott, or is Sinnott closer to Sanders than a lot of people think?
I think it's a pretty big gap. We're talking Sinnott round 4, maybe even mid to late round 4. And so I think fantasy wise, we kind of have the top 2, and then it's dart throw time in the late rounds of rookie drafts. I mean, Sinnott was productive in a system that he's a good blocker, productive, good hands. He's not a super athlete by any means, but we've seen and we'll talk about Cade Stover from Ohio State next. Two very similar players. We've seen the uninspiring tight end have success, right? The Jake Fergusons and the Dalton Schultzes of the world. I think Ben Sinnott profiles a little more like that, where he's going to block first, and it might turn into him getting some receptions and some red zone looks.
Cade Stover, let's talk about him. Ohio State. I don't like doing. Well, actually, let's do this, Shane. I get triggered and irked, and because I used to be this guy when people talk about a player and his future success in the NFL based on where he went to school. So there's a lot of people that will say, "Oh, Caleb Williams, I'm out on him. When's the last time USC's had a good quarterback?" and like, you can't just look at this. There's more nuance to it. Like, you can't just look at it in a vacuum and say, because this guy went to school here, his odds of being successful in the NFL are slim and none. Or conversely, because a guy went to school here, he's going to be awesome in the NFL. I will say that the tight end production and the tight ends from Ohio State haven't exactly been world beaters. And I think you're going to tell me Cade Stover is going to join that long line of underwhelming Buckeye tight ends in the NFL. But I think just before we get to Stover, that's an important thing. That what I just brought up, that's an important thing to understand. These are all individual players, and we can't just lump them in by doing lazy analysis saying because he went to this school, he's going to stink or be great. It's a lot more different. There's a lot more that goes into it.
There is, and it's hard. Someone like me, I mean, I'd put my film watching up against, in terms of amount, against anyone. Like, it's hard when you're watching year after year after year and you see the same helmet and the same,
Right.
type of player, and you're like, it's hard sometimes to get out of that rut. But, people that say that wouldn't have taken CJ Stroud in their fantasy draft. Let's say that, right? So yeah, I think you missed out. So it is an important distinction. Try to look at these players individually, look at traits. Now, sometimes if you have a long-running coach like a Nick Saban, you have a scheme that's in place and players are fitting into that scheme in a certain way. So we sometimes can draw some of those, or, I think the Iowa tight ends are a perfect example. And Kirk Ferentz has been there for God forever, so using tight ends in a similar way, but it doesn't mean it's definitely going to happen for this player. Eric All from Iowa is going to get drafted. He's not going to be Sam Laporta here. So I think it's important to make that distinction.
Yeah. Stover, that said, kind of a day 3 dart throw, right?
Yeah, and I think one benefit he has maybe versus the past Ohio State tight ends is he's not. Sometimes Ohio State tight ends have been these guys with a little bit of flash, supposed to be receivers, and then just fizzled out in the NFL. Cade Stover is like the tough block and block a guy for 2 seconds and get out and catch a little leak pass, right? He's a tough SOB, and I think that mentality can work in the NFL. Maybe not for fantasy too much, but I think it can get him maybe, he can last for a while as a number 2 tight end on the team.
Is there, and Wes Leeser, who's watching us on Twitter right now, Cade Stover is a dog. Well, he was a Buckeye, but yeah, he might be a dog as well. Let me ask you this. Redraft leagues, never too early best ball tournament, which I know you've been doing. For rookie tight ends, is it Bowers and Sanders, and then you're not looking at anybody else for redraft? Is that how you're looking at it?
Yeah, pretty much. Maybe if tight ends go quick, like last round, I may take a dart throw on one of these other tight ends, but it's probably doubtful.
Okay. Now for Dynasty, stay with me on this one. Let's say you do have that marination position, which I think I'm just coining tonight on the show. The marination.
I like it. I think you
the marination position on your roster. I'm not. That's way too much. I'm not going to do that. Don't give me a chore, Shane. I'm not doing chores tonight. If you have the opportunity to have one of these, day 3 tight ends on your roster, is there one that stands out above the rest? Or if you do have the marination position, are you not seeing anybody worth the sweat, worth the cook here from these rookie tight ends this year outside of Bowers and Sanders?
I'll say there's one other guy that we haven't talked about that I probably would take that swing on. The odds are slim, but if I have that marination position, I like Theo Johnson from Penn State. Wasn't super productive, but give me the 6'6", 254, came out of high school as more of an athlete than tight end. Like, he has the size and the athleticism to be something, but like never put it together, right? Like, that's the guy I want on that marination bottom of the roster. I can cut him if he gets cut, but if not, that's the case. So he's kind of the guy, maybe even the never too early best ball draft. So I'm really feeling frisky that last round. Maybe I'll toss the dart at Theo Johnson.
And any love for Jaheim Bell, as long as this has been a Florida State show tonight? Any love for Jaheim Bell at all in Dynasty?
I wish. Like, I like Jaheim Bell. He's athletic, but he's just the H-back, fullback kind of position. I just don't know if he can have the production consistently.
Okay, and that's fine. I just wanted to clear that up. Now, we did have a question from the chat earlier, and this will be like, I know we've been doing a ton of rookie stuff, but I want to get back to the question that we had earlier in the chat. And our producer, Matt Deutsch, can probably put it up on the screen because I'm not finding it. Oh, I got it right here. Watching on Twitch. It was Roast Tatos wants to know who our top 10 in fantasy are this year. Now, that's from a redraft perspective, Shane. I'll bring this up right now. In the Never Too Early Best Ball tournament, this is the top 10. And I know this doesn't play well, but I'm going to say it anyway. McCaffrey, the 101. Then you get 3 receivers, Lamb, Jefferson, Tyreek Hill. Another running back in Breece Hall before we get a couple more receivers, Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Then we have a guy who was talking about wanting to go for 2,000 rushing yards this year in Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs. Back-to-back second-year running backs going at the 108 and 109, and then Puka Nacua is the 10th player selected on average in the Never Too Early Best Ball tournament. Do you have an issue with any of those guys? McCaffrey, Lamb, Jefferson, Hill, Hall, Chase, St. Brown, Robinson, and then Gibbs, Nacua.
Not too much.
How close does that ADP mirror how you would have your rankings set up for the top 10 this year?
Yeah, I think it's fairly close. I think I'd probably knock Breece Hall down a little bit. I think I'd rather those 2 receivers in Chase and Amon-Ra over him, just for some of the Jets' questions of how that offensive line is going to be. But he's still in the top 10 for me. I probably wouldn't take Puka Nacua in at 10. Maybe I'm just a dummy in that sense. But
why is that? Curiously, why is that too high for Nacua?
There's no way he repeats that production, right? Like, I feel like that's almost like he's hit the ceiling. We saw the ceiling. It's only down from here, baby. Like, hopefully it's not too much down, but he better make that production happen again to be worth the pick at 10. And to me, I'd rather take AJ Brown. I'd rather take a shot on Garrett Wilson, I think, than Puka Nacua.
Okay, and I get it because it comes to pedigree, right? Like this guy was a 7th round, nobody, and he had this great season. What's the likelihood that 7th round picks have duplicated performances like that? Hasn't been great. So I get it. And I get why you'd want to go with a more pedigreed guy. Quite frankly, after you said that, now I might want to go with a more pedigreed guy if I'm picking at the end of the first round. Wow, what a show. We have had a fantastic opportunity tonight to chat with Shane Hallam from Draft Countdown, of course, Dynasty League Football, Draft Sharks, a lot of stuff you have going on. If somebody is wanting to learn more about everything you're doing, including your 2025 mock draft, your 2026 mock draft, your 2049 mock draft, I'm sure that's floating on the interweb somewhere. Shane, is the best place to go just x.com/Shane P. Hallam?
Yeah, that's the best. I have kind of my content pinned. Go to draftcountdown.com. Everything's free. You can see the mock drafts, the rankings for every position. You can check out my podcast there, The Draft Countdown, wherever you get your podcasts. You can download that with me and my partner, Brian Bosarge. Then if you want more of the fantasy stuff, Draft Sharks, doing some great work for them. And Dynasty League Football, if you want my rookie rankings from a fantasy perspective, Devy rankings, they're over there.
That's fantastic. Shane, thank you so much. What a blast we had tonight. Learned so much, too. Entertaining and informative. 2 things that have never been, I've never been described as, and you were a champion of both of them tonight. Thank you. We'll do this again sometime real soon. Enjoy the remainder of draft season.
No, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Shane Hallam, ladies and gentlemen, joining us as our guest co-host tonight. I want to shout out to him and our producer, Matt Deutsch. We're back at 7 o'clock next Thursday, 7 o'clock Eastern Time. Analytics of Dynasties, Jordan McNamara will be my guest co-host. If you're looking for some action until then, myffpc.com. The Never Too Early Best Ball tournaments are available there right now. Win a $25,000 or $10,000 grand prize. We have the Fantasy Pros Championship also live as well. The live drafts actually just launched earlier this week. You can win $1 million right now. Draft in February for $1 million. You can't do that anywhere else. MyFFPC.com. And of course, Go to myffpc.com to pick up your Dynasty Orphan teams as well. Plenty of good deals there, including some that have been lowered to $1. myffpc.com is where to go. For Shane Hallam, I'm Eric Balkman. The Best of the Better Sports Network is up next. Enjoy your Thursday night, everybody. Talk to you next week.